Hey, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get started in a few minutes. I see that there's a good number of people that are already trickling in. I'd love to know where you guys are all, you ladies and gentlemen are all joining in from. If you wouldn't mind dropping into the chat, just share with me where you're calling in from today. I see a few names that I know here. Awesome to see. I see Alice, Charlotte, Fabricio, Gordon. Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, Rob, how's it going? Hey, Rob, thanks. All right, from Chicago. Also, another Roberto from Madrid. Gordon from Amherst, that's great. Billy, welcome. Welcome from New York. I'm probably not far away from you. I'm here in Brooklyn. Stephanie from Zurich, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to give us another minute or two, then I'm going to jump in. We got a good conversation lined up today, and really looking forward to chatting with our guest about the state of Kickstarter. Billy, no worries about writing in the Q&A area, and that's great that you actually wrote that. That means you know that it exists, because I think a lot of you wind up not knowing that, and that's going to be the place that I'm going to ask all of you to use to drop questions as we go through the event. Because at the end we'll have an opportunity for Heather and I to answer questions from all of you. Jackson, welcome, sir. Good to see you here. Cool. Zach, nice to see you, buddy. Great. With that said, I'm going to get us started. The first couple of minutes, I'm just going to go through some like overview welcome kind of stuff, but about 5 minutes in, we'll get into our conversation with Heather. So first off, I'm Giulio Terra. I am the founder of Launch Studio. We are a company and education studio, and our main offering right now is a Kickstarter masterclass. Before founding Launch Studio, I worked at Kickstarter for 5.5 years. Actually worked closely with Heather for a lot of that time, and with Zach, who's also attending the event. And we were responsible for helping designers in the design and tech community and advocating for them at Kickstarter, a work I really love, which is why I continue to work with this community even now that I've left Kickstarter about two years ago, or actually almost 3 years ago now. Time flies. So I hope you're here today for our event about the state of design and technology on Kickstarter, which we have a lot to talk about in this area. As I mentioned, I'm going to breeze through some slides to begin with. Then we'll jump into a conversation with our special guest, where we're going to explore trends, best practices, and the future for creators launching products on Kickstarter. And our guest is Heather Swift-Hunt. And Heather is a senior director of design and technology at Kickstarter. She's been working at Kickstarter for a good number of years, and her work there is to support hardware startups, product designers, and makers of all kinds that are coming to Kickstarter to bring their products to life. She's currently based in the UK, and beyond just focusing on the design and tech community, she also leads a lot of the work at Kickstarter to expand the global footprint of the company and to get creators from around the world, in Europe and Asia primarily, to come to Kickstarter and launch products and other projects on the platform. So Heather will be joining us in a few minutes, but before that, I just want to give you some tips on how to get the most out of the event. So the first thing is, I say here the welcome is going to last about 10 minutes, but it'll actually be about 5. We're going to have a good chunk of time for the conversation with Heather. I think we'll have about 45, 50 minutes for the conversation that I'll have with her. And then we'll have about 20 minutes or so at the end for you all to be able to ask your questions and to both me and her. I think mostly to her, of course, but I'll be on board as well in case there's anything that I can help answer. So a few ways that you can get the most value from today's event is to be an active participant. And there are moments where we're going to ask you to respond to a poll, or we might ask you to share something in the comments, or drop questions into the Q&A for the end of the session. And really that's, to get the most value here, we really want all of you to participate, because that really is going to help us sometimes, see where that might lead where our conversation goes, and other times it just helps us know who our audience is and what you care about, so that we can take that in mind as our conversation evolves. As I've mentioned a few times already, we have the Q&A panel where I'm asking you to drop your questions in there. And the reason why I'm always asking people to drop their questions in there early is because we are not going to have the chance to answer all questions. And so what we ask people to do is upvote the questions. And if you drop it in early and you keep upvoting the questions that you think are most important to get answered, that will make sure that not just your question gets answered, but also questions that you find interesting, those will go to the top of the list. So make sure to, as the event goes on, drop your questions in there and upvote them as necessary. And stay until the end. That's when we're going to answer questions. And there might be a few things that we share in the comments that we won't share elsewhere. So just stay till the end and be an active participant. All right. With that said, now I am going to welcome Heather. I just need to bring her in. She's currently listening in as an attendee. I'm just going to promote her here to a panelist. Okay, Heather, you should be on here any second. And the only thing that I wanted to remind you is just make sure to unmute yourself, because I know that when you get joined in, you're muted. So first off, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Julio. It's such a pleasure to be here. And also, I recognize some of those names that you called out. So hi to all my friends in the audience too.
Awesome. And I just wanted to start a little bit by hearing from you a little bit about your personal background, a little bit more information from your own words, what your role at Kickstarter is. So why don't we just start there? How long have you been at the company, and what is your focus right now at Kickstarter?
Yeah, sure. So you did a great introduction, but I've been at Kickstarter for about 5.5 years. And yep, I'm based in the UK, and I focus on the design and tech category, specifically from our international community. That said, I'm also well rooted in our US business, our US community as well. I've worked with a number of American projects, but I have a focus, on primarily our European and Asian markets. I've done a lot of work with creators in China recently, specifically too. And yeah, my role is essentially kind of a mixture of getting out there and kind of looking for new creators, new startups, new projects in the world, and introducing them to the idea of Kickstarter. I do a lot of advising. So whether that's through things like this, workshops, talks, or sometimes some one-on-one, office hours with people. And also I advocate for the design and tech communities internally at Kickstarter. So just, making sure that the needs of this community are essentially, represented internally. That's a bit about what I do.
Awesome. And can you just share a little bit, what were you doing before you came to Kickstarter? I think you have an interesting background. So yeah, just a minute on that.
Yeah, well, actually, I think it's relevant because I think my background is very emblematic of a lot of Kickstarter stuff, or it's very common. So I studied fine art, but then later studied business. So I have this background in both art and design and in business. I did an MBA in my master's. I'm here in the UK. My background was in museums and galleries for about a decade before working at Kickstarter. And my focus has really always been around thinking about how people can use technology, or what kind of interesting things they can do with it. What are the creative applications of technology? What do technologies, new technologies, mean for society? What kind of impact are they having on culture? This is really my personal passion and kind of what I bring to everything I do. And I think that really, fits with Kickstarter and how we see these categories as well. Not just about new gadgets and kind of putting new stuff out into the world, but how that stuff resonates and kind of what it means. So yeah, I think, as I say, it's a kind of very Kickstarter-y background, I think.
Awesome. So before we dive into the next section about really start digging in the state of Kickstarter, I'm just going to launch a little poll. This is something I always like to launch at these events, to share these events, is really understand why are people joining us today? So I just put that up there if everyone could quickly respond. I just want to understand, are you here because you're working on something that you hope to launch in the future? Are you joining us because you are actively working on something that you're planning to launch, or maybe you have something live? Maybe you've already done a few Kickstarter campaigns. It's a tool that you use and you want to just kind of tune in to see, to hear from somebody at Kickstarter what they're working on. Or maybe you're just curious on the topic. So I'm going to leave that up here just for another minute. I think we've gotten already a good number of responses. We've got about 70, close to 80% of people responding. So I'm just going to, oh, look at that, 88%. I'm going to close it now, and then we can proceed. I'm just to show the results. it seems like, most people are
nice.
preparing for to launch a Kickstarter campaign soon. There's one that has something live. There's a few that are serial creators. There's a good number of people also that support the ecosystem. So that's great. Thank you all for sharing, why you're here with us today. And so let's now dive into the state of the design and tech categories on Kickstarter. So first off, before we dig deep into like how the categories are doing today, would you mind just sharing a little bit, like, how have you seen the categories evolve during your time at Kickstarter?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously I've been at Kickstarter for quite a long time now, and so things have changed. That said, I would say that Kickstarter as a platform and as a company hasn't really changed a lot. What has changed is kind of like the internet around Kickstarter. So, when I first started, or even, Julio, when you were there even earlier, I think that, the internet was maybe a little bit less professionalized. Like, you could put a project up and maybe it would go viral, organically through social media. This idea of like a viral project was still kind of like a really big kind of aspiration for a lot of people. But I think these days, like, things are more professionalized. Like, the Facebook has their algorithms on lockdown where, you need to spend money on advertising if you kind of hope to get traction on those kinds of communities. So it's just kind of changed the way that kind of the internet interacts with like using a tool like Kickstarter. That has like positives and negatives. I think that on a positive side, it means that you're not just relying on luck. So you're not just like putting a project up and saying like, hey, I hope it will go well. There's a lot more documentation out there about kind of routes and maps to like how you can have a successful project. You can learn a lot from other creators, and you can kind of like follow a lot of different advice. There's a lot of more services out there, a lot more platform things like Launch Studio. So it's like, both a positive and a negative, I guess. But I think that, looking at the positive, it just means that there's a lot more advice out there. I would say.
No, that's awesome. And I think it's totally true how, there's one of the big benefits of Kickstarter, and it's something I remember talking to creators a lot, even when I was at Kickstarter, is how nowhere else are you going to launch something and you can look at every single person, every single other product that has been launched by somebody on that platform. I mean, that's like, this ability to stand on the shoulders of everyone who came before you is unique on Kickstarter, not only because, of course, creators are often willing to share later or connect with people who are going through the process to share from their experience, but you also, just in the platform itself, you have this, possibility of doing deep research to learn from the way that other people have succeeded before you, which I think is something that I think people often underestimate the value of that resource.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say, like, again, the platform itself, the mechanism hasn't changed so much, but I think also, again, that's kind of a good thing. We're kind of, it's proven to be like a relatively resilient and like useful model. And I guess, I'm happy to see it like a trusted tool in people's toolbox for how they launch a product and bring it to life. It's becoming, kind of like a pencil, it's like something that you rely on, how it works, and you always have it around.
Awesome. And so now let's dig in a little bit to how things have been going recently. And, I think so much of our lives at the moment has been shaped by the pandemic that's been, really taking over such big parts of our lives, but since the beginning of last year. So how was 2020 for Kickstarter? What was the impact that, of course you can't know what percentage of the performance last year was impacted by the pandemic, but I'd love to hear in general, how was the year, and did you guys see specific impacts that you could attribute to the madness that we were all living through during that time? Yeah,
so 2020 was a great year for design and technology on Kickstarter. We saw more pledges to those categories than many years before it. In fact, we were within essentially 2015, 2016, and 2020. Those were our best ever pledge years on Kickstarter. So it's been just great to see the number of projects has decreased a little bit, but the amount of funding to those projects has increased. So, I think that a lot of creators, when they took the leap and they decided that they were going to go ahead and launch their passion project, maybe something that they had been, putting off on the back burner and like finally had the time or the courage to do it during the pandemic, like when they were actually launching those projects, we found that there was a huge backer response to them. I think it's something that we saw, people saw across like all sorts of internet kind of companies or businesses, that there was a lot of like, you're at your home, you're at your computer, you're able to buy things online or pledge to things on Kickstarter. So I think that that's an industry-wide trend. But I don't know, I think that there's something also about this kind of like altruistic motivation where, in this time, people like really connect with the passion that creators have for bringing their projects to life. And so we're willing to kind of like back it and just to put their dollars kind of towards it. But yeah, we were really pleased that it ended up being kind of almost a record-breaking year for design and tech on Kickstarter.
And what were there any specific kind of trends in terms of types of projects that you saw? Any like any types of product that seemed to be doing really well, or any product that stood out as that seemed very of the moment?
Yeah, so we don't do a lot of tracking of like these kind of like subcategories on Kickstarter. Like we do a lot of tracking, of course, of like design and technology or how the games categories are doing. But in terms of the let's say like travel products or fitness products or something like that, we don't track them. So I can't give you like specific kind of data around that. But what I can say is that it's our job to kind of look at all these projects as they're launching. And so we have a really good kind of intuitive sense of kind of what has done well. And especially if you look at our top funding projects of last year, they were hitting on some really like almost like, poetic kind of themes. It was, renewed interest in nature. So we had a project called Terra Planter, which is like a sort of planter that you could grow, indoor plants in a kind of slightly different way. And that was, a super successful project last year. We had Bird Buddy, which is an amazing bird feeder that could let you kind of track which birds were coming to your yard and kind of learn more about them. Those did really well. So again, this sense of like people being interested in nature, I think we saw that kind of trend happening. There was some cooking products that did really well. So our biggest European project last year was the Otto's Grill, and it was like a smart barbecue. And they ended up raising, I think, like $5 million. The prepped projects that launched last year did really well. I think they raised in the 2 millions. And just like, just seeing those kinds of very pandemic kind of zeitgeist types of products doing really well. So yeah, it was really awesome to see. Indoor fitness as well. We had some awesome breakouts there.
And can you talk a little bit about, because I think you're bringing up these great examples of these projects that did really, really well. Like, I'd love to hear from you a little bit, like, what are you seeing in terms of like smaller projects by independent designers? How is that part of the community doing? And what do the numbers say? I mean, or is there something you can glean from the numbers, even if you can't, just thinking about like, projects of that scale, like what would you have to say for creators who are working on kind of smaller projects about the moment right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's natural whenever we're asked about this stuff to talk about the blockbusters and the ones that get the most traction, but we've certainly seen like a ton of small projects. I mean, small projects have always been the bread and butter of Kickstarter. So, projects raised between $1,000 and $10,000, there's a huge number of them. And we're really proud of that because we feel like continues to be a great home for these small side projects, small projects from designers. So yeah, we saw that this year as well. There was, continued to be a number of those kind of projects launching.
Awesome. And one of the things that I know we talked a little bit about, and I know I told you I get a lot of questions around, is around how are people coming to Kickstarter nowadays in terms of mobile versus desktop? Yeah. What was there an impact that you guys saw last year in terms of like usage trends from that regard?
Yeah, so it was really interesting to see. So we, I believe the breakdown last year was 58%, if I'm getting it right. It was on web browsers, and the rest was on different forms of mobile. So first of all,
that's pledges, right?
Pledges, yes, excuse me. 58% of pledges were done using a web browser versus, mobile is for the rest of it. And what's really interesting about that is that in the previous years, it had been declining a bit, but then last year, of course, like it makes total sense. We saw it jump up again so that the web browser, again, like raised a few points in 2020. So, I think we are seeing more and more people, of course, pledging on mobile, but Kickstarter, I think, yeah, people are looking and pledging on web and like getting deeper into that story. And so it still remains like the majority of pledges are coming through web.
Awesome. And so just thinking about like all these things that happened last year, I mean, this being an example, like, do you, and I know this is totally asking for your opinion, like, what do you think might be the long-term impact of COVID on the platform? Do you think it will be a sustained impact in terms of the performance levels or certain trends, or again, just totally, what's your opinion on this?
Well, I don't think I have a super strong opinion, except for I'll say that we did expect it to decline again, like a little bit, just naturally. We thought, okay, there's this pandemic effect, so we're going to see a lot of people, pledging with their extra income if they have it or whatever. But we haven't seen that tail off this year. So I haven't put together 2021's numbers yet, but they're still looking really strong. And I think, there have been a number of months, even so far this year, that have broken our records, for months over many years. So yeah, I think that we're going to continue to see strong numbers for the foreseeable future. I think that, of course, like all those backers that are coming new to Kickstarter and learning about these new projects, they stick around, they back other projects. So every new person in that kind of community, I think, is, another person to potentially pledge to another project. So yeah, I hope it will stick around.
No, that's great. That's great. And so now I wanna dig in a little bit to even starting with one of the things that you just brought up here in terms of backers. I think one of the creators often ask me, like, what is the value of launching on Kickstarter? And I think you guys have some data that speaks to some of that. And one number that I always find interesting is we'll get into like the whole, like, what level of pledges can be attributed to Kickstarter on campaigns, but let's even just start like with that number of like the importance of repeat backers. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you guys seeing there? Like, what is the average of pledges that can be attributed to repeat backers on campaigns in the design and tech space?
Yeah, it's really high. So I think that in design and tech, it's something like over 70%, like 73% or something of backers to any campaign have backed a Kickstarter project before. So they already have an account, they've already backed something, and they're coming back to back something new. So, I mean, that's pretty great. And I think, it is a great kind of selling point, I guess, for using the platform, is that those people already have those accounts. They're already familiar with like how Kickstarter works. And so, going out to them and saying, hey, like, I'm launching this thing on Kickstarter, there's already a baseline level of familiarity there.
That's awesome. And I think that reminds me, we had an event with Ido from Jellup a few months ago. And one of the things, I think he was talking a lot about in terms of audience and how, when you're trying to get people to back your Kickstarter campaign, how often when they're out in the world looking to target those people, like how one of the most important parts of that Venn diagram is like, have they backed the project before on Kickstarter? Because that's, those people are just so much more likely. I'm not saying that you should always, of course, try to find whoever cares deeply about your project, but how that is, something super important. And I know that's something that creators sometimes struggle with, but I think these numbers, talk to that fact. I mean, and also I think I'm a case in point I've backed 2,500 projects. So, I think there's definitely, a lot of people, not like me, but who have, backed one or two things that they think were cool and now are kind of, interested in looking for other, are open to and understand how the platform works and things like that. So
yeah. I mean, I think that's certainly important, and we're really proud of those numbers. I do think that it's always most important to focus on the audience that you want to target as a designer, as a business. Like really focus on like who do you think is going to enjoy using this project or product, and focus on them, and try not to get like too obsessed with figuring out like who the Kickstarter backer is, and like use your own kind of knowledge and research of your field to guide you as like a guiding principle. And then, the Kickstarter backers can be a bonus, I suppose. Yeah. Or a lot of people out there will have already, a lot of people have backed things on Kickstarter. So naturally a lot of
exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that gets to the second point when you're saying the Kickstarter will be like, let's talk a little bit about the data. I think, when you, for those of you who have run Kickstarter projects, you are familiar with with a little pie chart that shows the attribution of the sources of your pledges. And there's like a few different colors, and there's a green part of that pie chart, which is reflects, people who back the project because they found out about the project. They were led to the project page through Kickstarter somehow. And I want to first even understand, let's start with a number, like what that contribution level is that you guys seen for the last year. And then I'd love to break down a little bit, just talk about like how that is tracked at a high level. Of course, not getting to nitty gritty, but
yeah, sure. So it is significant. I mean, last year in design, or in 2020 in design and tech, we saw that 40% of all the pledges to design and tech overall came from Kickstarter referred sources. So again, we can talk about what those are in a second, but 40%, I mean, that's pretty significant. And yeah, we're really, really proud of that. Again, whenever we talk about these numbers, we like to say, like, you can't bank on that. It's not the case that every single project that launches is going to receive 40% of their pledges, from Kickstarter, and that you should just, that's already in the bag. I think that, again, it's really in your best interest to consider this kind of icing on the cake, and really focus on who those users that who they are, where they are, and really focusing on them. But anyway, it is cause to celebrate, because we know that there are a lot of people who are on Kickstarter already who are interested in backing projects like the ones that launch.
Yeah. And I think to that point, I mean, one of the things that I see a lot, yes, that percentage definitely varies a good bit. I mean, you can say the average, but you can have a project that gets 50-60% of their pledge from Kickstarter. You can get a project that gets 10-20%. Yeah. But one thing also that which we'll talk a little bit more about later, which is the notion where, like, sometimes your own efforts also help you get more traction within Kickstarter as you get on popular lists and things like that. So it's super crucial, for you to be pushing your product really hard to your communities and to your audiences, because that in and of itself, that excitement, activity that you generate is actually really crucial for you to continue to get traction from Kickstarter. And I could be wrong. This is totally not, like, I find like that's in some ways a lagging indicator. Not like it's not. It's more, the Kickstarter, as your funding grows, it often can also help you grow that Kickstarter funding. But it's not for some exception. It's the exception to the project where, like, Kickstarter has this huge thing and it's like raises 60% of the funding at the beginning, and then they start catching up and making that a small percentage of the pie. I find it that whatever percent that project is going to get usually remains somewhat consistent.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when I'm advising creators, just as a rule of thumb, I tell them that you can expect between 20 to 30% from Kickstarter. I feel like that's a really safe range. Like, even though I've just said, there's 40% in 2020, I feel like 20 to 30% is really safe. So, so you can use that to guide you, but I wouldn't bank on anything more, just in case.
And how? So now let's just actually dig in for 1 minute. Like when you talk about Kickstarter's contribution, like how does that come about? Like, what are the various different ways that I'm not talking about the technical attribution thing, but more like what are the different ways that Kickstarter elevates projects, or that projects get in front of potential backers?
Yep. So there's two types of essentially features on Kickstarter. One are our automated features, and one is our editorial features. So the automated features are all of the ways that we recommend projects to backers through like automated methods, depending largely on its kind of popularity in terms of traffic and pledging. It also, we recommend things, of course, according to backer taste profile, so things they backed in the past. And yeah, one or two other factors, but like project we love status is another one. But yeah, the automated features can be really powerful, and we're surfacing projects automatically all the time. The second is editorial features, and those are some of our newsletter slots, our featured project slot on the front page or on the design and tech page. And those ones are handpicked by an editorial team. And we can get more in depth about that, but our editorial team are essentially looking at every single project that launches and trying to find essentially great projects with stories that are told well. So that's broadly speaking, the two categories of ways that we feature things.
That's great. And just to dig in a little bit deeper on that. And I don't think you have this data. I don't know if you have a sense of this even, but like, what do you have a sense of how powerful the algorithmic features are versus the editorial? Is there a general kind of sense of yeah, because the algorithmic ones, I remember when I was at Kickstarter, those were just starting off. So at that point, it was you had very few. Like, and now I mean, I get emails that are algorithmic generated, I think every week, with recommendations for me, as well as all those different places on Kickstarter where I get the custom recommendations based on, and not including even the sorting that Kickstarter has, optimized and things like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't have a data-based answer to give you there. I will say that both of them are really powerful. I think that the automated ones are probably more powerful in a way than the editorial. Yep. I mean, because, and weirdly, I find, when I talk about that 20, you can expect 20 to 30% from us. That tends to be the same percentage, whether we feature them or not. It kind of ends up in that type of range. So I know that the automated features are super powerful, and probably, yeah, if I had to guess, I would say of the two, they're probably going to be the more.
No, that makes sense. My guess was also the automated feature. Of course, there's the outlier products that get featured by editorial and really, just are perfectly attuned to the moment and to an audience and might blow up big. But yeah, thank you for that. I know that was I didn't expect you to have real data, but let's talk now about I mean, what I want to dive into now a little bit is two things. One of them is like, dive a little bit deeper into like, what are the kind of things that the editorial team looks for when the feature projects?
Yep.
And the other thing is just like, what are the kind of projects that Kickstarter that your team's excited about? Like, what are the types of projects that you're excited about? So I don't know if you have a preference of which one that we should tackle first.
Well, we were talking about editorial, so let's stick with that for a while. And I can kind of explain when I get to the sort of outreach, like what our team is interested in. I'll tell you kind of why that matters. But in terms of our editorial team, well, first of all, they are looking, the product does matter. At the end of the day, they're looking for projects that are like noteworthy, that they're culturally impactful, that they're sort of like best in class, of their kind of category. So that does, make a difference. It always starts with the product. And there will be certain categories of projects, for example, that we have seen a lot of those types of products before. So you have to have a really high bar to stand out. So for example, everyday carry items or backpacks or wallets or things like this, like there's a huge community for them on Kickstarter. Like, for example, watches is another one. Watch is the most searched term on Kickstarter. There's a huge community for it there, but it can be a really high bar to meet for our editorial team, because we've seen a lot of watches. So it takes a lot to stand out. But beyond the product itself, there are a few things that we're looking for, or that team is looking for. The first one I'll say is like authenticity is super, super important. So, we really, and I might touch on this a few times, but like, we really want to protect Kickstarter as a thing that is separate to like e-commerce. Like, it's not buying something. It's really about people, kind of backers and creators coming together to create new things, this kind of collaboration, understanding how things are made, kind of, so creators who are sincere and sort of open, honest, like have good communication, they engage with backers, like that kind of stuff is really important to us. So authenticity is a big one. Community is another big one. So, I said that communication, like just, we're really looking for creators who seem to have a genuine motivation for wanting to build a community around their idea. And like, yeah, that there's a particular reason why they want to launch on Kickstarter. Usually it will come down to that community. Again, so yeah, celebrating the creative process, as I said, is good. So showing prototypes or sketches or, some of that kind of design material can be really helpful if you want to catch their eye, because again, it's kind of what makes Kickstarter unique, is that you can the backers can kind of learn how things are made and kind of connect with your vision before it's even made. And then the last thing I'll say is just basically that it's a well-composed project page. So it doesn't need to be like super slick or anything. It's not that it has to be like, a really expensive video or the photography is really, but just that it's like considered and that it's communicated well, that you're taking some care in terms of putting good images on the page and sort of telling your story in a really kind of considered, visually appealing way.
Awesome. So before we then dive into the kind of products that you, that your team kind of gets really excited about at the moment, I wanted to ask a question, and this is something, again, I suspect this is still a black box as it was when I worked at Kickstarter, but do you have anything that you can publicly share about, from an algorithm perspective, like what are the types of things that the algorithm looks for when it's, popular, I think, is a thing that most people want to get into. I think is the list that, at least when I talk to creators, like they're most like, how do I get onto the popular list? And I always tell them there's no checklist that you can do. It's not like, ooh, get this many backers and get that much traffic. But do you have any sense of like what are some of the attributes that that might get some, like, a project bumped up in the rankings for that?
Yeah. So the big ones are the obvious ones, just really traffic and pledging. Like the more traffic you have to the page, the more pledging, that's going to definitely see your popularity rise. The project we love tag will also influence it. So, you might see some of the projects we love surface a bit higher because, again, we want to kind of like pull out those exemplary projects and put them in front of backers. There are one or two other, I think, smaller things, but those are the big ones, and they're always changing. And that it's not that, it's a black box for any particular reason. It's just, we're always tweaking it and we're always changing it. So I would say that, and I know that you and I were talking about at some point about like a common perception that creators have is like, if I hit my funding goal on day one, is that going to catapult me to the top of the popularity or the magic? I actually, like, my sense was always no, but I wanted to get a categorical answer for you. So I went to our product team and I asked them and said, this is a common question we get. Can I answer it like categorically yes or no? And the categorical answer is no, it does not matter. So that is not something that is anywhere in that black box, that if you hit the funding goal on day one, that it's going to catapult you. So let's dispel that myth like here and now.
Great. No, that's awesome. Yeah, because that is the and I understand, other benefits that creators might get from that. I know there's a lot of people talk about social proof and all, there's definitely other benefits that can be gotten from reaching your goal right away. But my answer is always like, I think it's very unlikely that the Kickstarter's algorithm would do that. But thank you for getting that answer, because when I was there, I could never get that answer. So I appreciate you were finally able to get it. Awesome. Yes. So let's go back now and chat a little bit about, like, so what are the things that you guys are excited about, the kind of projects that you guys want to support and that you want to see more of on the platform?
Yeah, and again, I said I would mention why this matters. So our outreach team, our design and tech outreach team is relatively small. We're a few people, and as I said at the top of this session, our role is really to go out there and find really interesting projects, kind of introduce them to the idea of Kickstarter, advocate for those projects internally, and say like, hey, this is a really cool project. We should definitely make sure to consider featuring it or take a look at it at least. We're not the ones making those decisions, but we can certainly advocate. And also a bit of sometimes campaign strategy support. So like, I will work with, let's say, between 20 and 30 creators every month to give them a bit of advice, depending on my capacity. And so, clearly, that's not, if we think about how many thousands of projects that are launching on Kickstarter every year on design and tech, like that's not, we can't talk to every single one of them. So we're kind of looking at through a few filters around projects that we're interested in kind of supporting and seeing proliferate and encouraging more of. And they are essentially from most specific to kind of least specific. The first one is creative tools. So, Kickstarter essentially exists. Our mission has always been around bringing creative projects to life, helping to bring creative projects to life. So creative tools are really important to us. And of course, that is a really wide definition. So it can be fabrication tools like 3D printers or laser cutters. It could be music technology. It could be camera gear. It could even be like cooking gear. Like cooking is a creative act. So anything that people are launching that is helping other people to make things is like near and dear to our heart. The second is science and innovation. So we love to see projects that are like kind of breakout technologies that are, that are kind of paving entirely new kind of paths or technologies. That could be anything like robotics. It could be space exploration, like telescopes, even green tech, environmental tech, STEM or education toys, STEM tech education toys. So this kind of thing of like a product in that kind of like science and innovation space is really also something that we're particularly keen on. And this again also kind of comes back to this idea that design and tech on Kickstarter is where we will open entirely new categories like VR, like the Oculus Rift, or 3D printing. Really, a lot of those early 3D printers really proliferated on Kickstarter in early days. So that's it. So creative tools, science and innovation. The third one I would say is notable design. So again, we're getting a little bit less specific, or it kind of like applies to more projects, but it could be something with like notable design credentials. So it could be like a notable designer, or it could be somebody solving a problem in the world with really innovative design thinking. It could just be that it has absolutely beautiful, well-considered product design, like really considered use of materials and form. So yeah, that's another kind of category that we're looking for. And the last one, perhaps the broadest one, or maybe not the broadest one, but another one is the social or environmental impact. So again, Kickstarter being a public benefit corporation, we really care about things that kind of have like a mission, whether that's like inclusive design, or maybe it's something that hits on environmental, or it's working with particular types of communities, or considered materials, these kinds of things. So social and environmental impact is the last one. So yeah, I think I got it there. Yeah, creative tools, awesome. Science, innovation, notable design, and social environmental impact.
That's great. What I want to do is take a quick break just to hear from our participants, our audience. What are they working on? Just share with us. You don't have to share super detail, but like, are you working on a project that is everyday carry? Are you working on a project that is a creative tool? Like, I'm going to pause this here, and we're going to have that uncomfortable silence if nobody has the courage to be the first one to share. So come on, drop in there. Let us know a little bit about what you're all working on.
Does it hit on one of those categories? Yeah.
Or just in general, I just love to hear. And I actually know what some of these people are working on. Okay, awesome. Billy, thank you for kicking us off. A mix between innovation and notable design. Very nice. Come on, anyone else is willing to take the plunge? Marcia, education tool. Awesome. The Mola, yes, of course.
We love Mola, yeah.
Good to see you here. Good to see you here. All right, I want to get two more shares. Come on. Who else is willing? Rob, awesome.
There we tripod, go. That's the camera gear.
Beautiful.
We love that.
Okay, notable design, environmental impact. Ashley, thank you. KL, creative tools, mobile videography. Aaron, food and drink related. Yes. Great. Thank you all for, I know there's some more people who have been sharing. I really appreciate it. This is really great. But let us continue now. And I want to switch gears now and just chat a little bit about what are some, either best practices or pitfalls. I'm going to keep this very general for you to, like, what are some, I know that you are able to see so many projects. I mean, that's your day in, day out. You're just looking at projects, talking to creators. What are some best practices that you've seen? They could be best practices that hold true for many, many years. It could be best practices that you've seen people doing more recently. But what are some things that you could share here to help people,
So I would say the first one, and it is maybe obvious to some, is underestimating the sort of pre-launch period before you come to Kickstarter, and how important it is that you have a list of people who are like ready to back your project from day one. So, when we're talking about this crowdfunding period, it's like 30 days, 45 days, 60 days on the long end. That's a really short period of time. Like it's short. So most of the creators that we see, certainly in those high number, like that are reaching, the hundreds of thousands or millions, they're certainly spending a lot of time collecting a community in advance of their launch that are ready to back from day one. And then they keep that momentum going kind of during the campaign period. So I would say that that's probably like the number one kind of like common pitfall is just like underestimating that essentially. Yeah.
Yep. And Heather, I think to that point, I've been recently running a poll on LinkedIn, which is still actually live. And a few people who are here today actually voted on that poll where it was asking creators, like, what is the biggest, most significant contributor to your funding on Kickstarter? And these are all people who have ran Kickstarter projects before. I think there's about 80 or so creators that have answered. And I think 55% of them, we're identifying pre-launch community building as like the most important thing, the most significant driver of their success. So I think that just kind of goes to what you're saying.
And I would say that also sort of like testing that community and kind of like the quality of that community is also really important. So I get a lot of creators that will say like, oh yeah, I mean, I have a huge network of friends and family. I have a lot of social media followers, everyone knows me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to launch and it's going to be fine because I'll just put it out there and everyone will back. That's not the case. You need to get those people onto a list, who are specifically signed up for your project and say like, hey, I'm interested in backing this project on day one. Like, let me be the first to receive your link to the page when it goes live. I'm going to get those early birds. So I think that, like that pitfall of like assuming that everybody is going to back your project and that's going to be enough. That's a common pitfall kind of related to this pre-launch period.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Is there, what other things do you have? Let's do one other one. Then I want to switch gears for one last little set of questions before we open it up for the audience to ask questions.
Sure. Well, obviously the way that you talk about your project and your product is super important. And so getting those basics right in terms of like how you can communicate the core features of your product right away. And like, just like describing with good copy, good images, like getting that right. And I think a lot of times people kind of rush into making their campaign page without really understanding what the sort of core value proposition is, or like basically just like how to describe their product really succinctly and how, like what the core features are. Kind of related to this is that, people might say, okay, well, I've made this new invention. It has 30 features that I'm really excited about. And like but you need to prioritize them and choose like 1 to 3 features that are going to like lead your entire kind of campaign. So that act of prioritization is really important because you can't say everything about your project all at once. You have to prioritize, and you're going to have to let some things go and let them be like secondary or maybe halfway down the page. I know designers are often like they love their products with other features, and it's really hard for them to let go. So I think, just like almost like doing the groundwork of like identifying core features, thinking about scenarios that are going to communicate those core features, thinking about the main image and the like copy, just, that communication, just getting the baseline really, really tight before you launch.
Awesome. No, that's great. Yeah. I like to tell creators about how, Kickstarter for them is more a storytelling platform than fundraising, in the sense that the work that they're going to be doing on Kickstarter is storytelling. Hopefully other people are going to be giving them money, but that's really kind of like,
good way of putting it.
Yeah. And so now let's quickly switch gears and talk about what's next for Kickstarter. And I specifically want to talk in 2 areas. The first area that I want to touch on is the trust and the brand, just because I know that that's something both, during my time at Kickstarter, I know that that's something that there was a lot of conversation around, especially within the design and tech space, because the design and tech space gets so much attention in the press, and because, even though most projects deliver, there are some that don't, and they sometimes create these big ripples that create some kind of blowback. And I know, just as a backer, I've seen recently Kickstarter implement some new little features towards setting people's expectations of what to expect when they back a project. So I'd love to hear from you, like what is Kickstarter doing around this area, and how is it thinking about trust at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. So like backer trust and how backers kind of experience Kickstarter is really important to us. And it's, a focus of the company. It has been, for a long time, it's something we thought deeply about. I think this year we're sort of getting serious about that and trying to test out a few things on the site. So, you pointed out, for example, just we've added a few different places where we're making sure that people know that Kickstarter is not a store, that backing is not buying. I think we call that out quite specifically on the page. Because we want everybody who backs a project on Kickstarter to kind of like know what they're getting into, to know that like again, it's not like buying something in a store, that it's really about helping a creator, bring an idea to life, and that there is a certain level of risk involved with that. We think that this is ultimately good for everybody, but for creators specifically, because, if you do, hit a snag in your fulfillment, if you're delayed a little bit, like, if a backer thinks, okay, well, but you told me, during the campaign that it was like guaranteed delivery at this time, or you were really hard selling me on a particular, if it felt like an e-commerce site, if you're really just trying to sell it as if backers were buying, then you're going to get yourself in hot water later. People are going to be really upset with you. And so, yeah, it's kind of like not good for anybody, really. The one thing I will say, though, is that as we've been doing that messaging, we keep a close eye on the impact that it has. And, we want our platform to be successful. We want you to be successful. So we're not going to implement anything that is going to have a major negative impact on your campaign. Like, we are keeping eyes on that tolerances and doing A/B testing, making sure that as we roll out that messaging, that it's not having like a huge impact on projects, and then we're seeing like, the funding plummet because of it. It's really just about like reconnecting backers with that, again, like core value of Kickstarter as like crowdfunding being something special, being something different than e-commerce, and just protecting that really, really closely. So yeah, backer trust is something we're always thinking about.
Awesome. And then just on the product feature side, in terms of like, what is Kickstarter working on for creators? Is there anything that you can share, broadly and specifically? I know the question that I'm sure you get all the time is around ad tracking stuff. Like what's Kickstarter's perspective on that type of things at the moment? I'd love to get your take on that. Yeah.
Well, just on a product front, just for anybody who's a repeat creator or hasn't maybe ran a project before and hasn't, it's been a while. I do want to call out one big product feature that we launched I think it was late last year. Gosh, the days blend in, which was add-ons. Like, people were asking for a long time a way for people to add on to their core pledge if you had different accessories or different kind of options that you wanted to add on. So add-ons is kind of like a relatively new feature that you should get familiar with, because we think that it can be very powerful for you. And just to simplify, it actually just does a lot of simplification, actually, more than anything else. So that's one thing. And then, yeah, we're of course always working on new bits and pieces, but nothing to announce kind of on that front. But in terms of ad tech, I mean, yeah, it's a super interesting time to be asking that question, because as people here may know, the changes to iOS have completely upended the way that that people use primarily Facebook advertising, where it's no longer possible to embed like pixel trackers on sites like Kickstarter. It was never possible to do that, actually, because we didn't allow it. But that was a most asked for feature, I think, especially within the design and community tech community, was when is Kickstarter going to allow us to integrate pixel? And so, yeah, it's just been interesting to see that now that's that decision we made not to implement it is now kind of being rolled out kind of everywhere. I think because Apple are really concerned about privacy, and that's something that Kickstarter has always kind of thought a lot about as well. So yeah, the question of like ad tracking technologies is something we've always debated. Like, we just want to make sure that, again, backers' privacy is respected, and more also like protecting Kickstarter and as again a place that's separate to e-commerce, like it's something special. It's not transactional in the same kind of way. Has always been really important to us. So nothing on the pipeline for ad tech, but I think that the reason for that is primarily now because the whole industry and ad tech is kind of upended, and I think that we need to wait and see kind of where things land to kind of figure out what's possible for people. But yeah, it's an interesting moment.
Awesome, thank you so much. And so now we're gonna make a switch to the audience Q&A. Before I do that, though, I just want to drop one more poll. And let me just quickly. So I want to drop another poll, is just to understand, everyone here who is planning to launch a project or have launched, or like, what is the most important benefit that you hope to get by launching a product on Kickstarter? So like, and I'm going to just launch this. Are you hoping to validate demand for your product, establish a connection with your first customers, raise funds for tooling? You'll see there's 5 different options there. as people start answering that, I'm going to give people also a minute to upvote questions in the Q&A and to add your own question. I see that I don't think any of the questions have been upvoted yet, so I just want to give a chance for people to take a quick look there and let us know what questions you want us to answer most. Otherwise, we're just going to take them based on which ones was asked first. But I know often people don't really take a look and upvote them until now. So I'm just giving it one more minute. I'm going to wait to get to 80% on the poll, or hopefully we'll get there. We're at 64%. You know what? I think not everyone is I think we had a good number of also people who support creators. So I'm going to close it out now. We're close to 70%. Let's close it out. I'm sharing the results. So thank you everyone for filling that out. So what we're seeing is that most people, 28 people, 20% of people either want to validate demand or raise funds for tooling and manufacturing. Those were the two tied as the top reasons. Then next up, we have tap into the powerful marketing mechanism that Kickstarter provides. And then the last two are establish connection with my first customer and acquire new customers cost effectively. I know that I'm forcing you to just choose one and that most of you probably, want to achieve more than one of these, but I think it's always helpful to what is the top one that's most important to you? All right, awesome. I see people have upvoted. So let us get started here. So the first question we have is from Billy. What's the best way to get on a phone call with a Kickstarter campaign support strategist before launching?
Yeah, well, we do have a way that you can get it. Julia's going to share, I think, exclusively for the Launch Studio community, a link that you can do to fill out some information about your project and share it with us so we can take a look. And if we feel like we can help or advise, then we can get in touch. Again, it's a capacity issue. We have a really small team. There's thousands of projects at launch. So it's not like we can get on a phone call with everybody. I am, generally speaking, though, always happy to hear from creators. Like if you want to drop me the link to your draft or your live campaign, if you find me on LinkedIn or whatever, I'm always happy to hear. It's just a matter of whether we can spend that time kind of talking and working one-on-one with you. I will say though that I do want to call out our support team, because a lot of people think that a support team is just some kind of robots who are working, in some other country or something like this. Our support team is really great. And if you do have a question, you can go to help.kickstarter.com and submit your question there. They'll get back to you in 1 or 2 days. So we have a really strong support team for those kind of lower level questions. And then beyond that, I'm happy to hear from creators and see what capacity we have. Great.
And Heather, I'll be dropping that link in the chat here. So that's not going to be available to anybody who looks at the replay of the event. It's just for people who are here. It's a link for a form.
You should have come. Yeah. Those people are going to be missing out. Yeah.
So thank you, Billy. Now let's go to Fami has a question. I have a kids-friendly product. What are the chances for this kind of niche in Kickstarter?
A kid-friendly project. I think, what do I say? Yeah, I think, obviously you're going to be appealing to the parents, with any kids product, enticing them to back the project. What can I say, generally speaking? Maybe just two kind of specific points. First of all, we do see loads and loads of kids projects, a lot of stuff around the kind of ed tech STEM space for whatever reason. I think that is an area that really blew up on Kickstarter. So we do have a lot of those types of projects that are sort of I don't know, teaching kids about robotics or teaching them how to code or whatever. That is a very well-trodden area. We do have things that are other more general toys. But yeah, two things I'll say. First, that you do have to keep in mind that when you're launching a project on Kickstarter, people aren't going to be receiving it for 6 months or 9 months down the road. So that can be a tricky hurdle sometimes if your product is really age specific. So if you're, I don't know, doing something that will help with sleep training, by the time the parent receives that, they might not actually need that product anymore. So just keep that in mind that, I think some products will have an easier time than others. And then the second thing that I'll say is, even though you're appealing to parents, make sure to make it look fun. We get, again, especially in the STEM education space, we get a lot of projects, and I have to say sometimes they lean too much on the sort of I don't know, the educational benefits and the sort of like the kind of science behind it and all this stuff. And they don't show like pictures of kids actually enjoying it and enjoying themselves. So that side of things is really important, even if your target is parents.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is like, there's so many projects that you can look that have been successful in this area. And it's just worth spending the time to do deep research on Kickstarter and look, though, not only for the one that succeeded, but also the ones that failed, because there are like any, and you can just learn so much of all the things that Heather's pointing out about making the project fun, like make sure that you show kids having fun, because parents only want to buy things that they think their kids are going to enjoy. So if you have super dry page, they're just not gonna. But you know, definitely, you know, we've seen some big successes. There's been some big successes in that space over the years. Yeah, good luck with the project. All right, next up, we have a question from Gordon about, I know you kind of alluded to this earlier, has Apple's privacy changes affecting receiving ads from Facebook and others impacted Kickstarter in any detectable way? Yeah.
I mean, Julia, you could probably help me out with this question too, because I know that you talk to a lot of service providers and you've caught up with them. But I will say, yes, certainly, you know, you were never able to implement Facebook Pixel on Kickstarter. So in a way, weirdly, we're like kind of in a better position than other platforms where they're having to change their entire way of kind of doing things. Like Kickstarter, people have always found like kind of workarounds for how they could optimize ads on Kickstarter. And I think a lot of those workarounds are going to be coming into their own now that like privacy has changed. But the answer is yes, it's kind of up in the air right now. I don't know, Julia, what have you been hearing from service providers?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been impacting it though in a way, because, you know, I think a lot of service providers, to your point, like, you know, for creators that are not using really advanced service providers with advanced tools, because a lot of service providers have created tools to try to get around Kickstarters by pixeling, you know, by doing redirects where they send somebody before they go to Kickstarter to another like page where you don't even see the other page, but that page just activates a pixel, for example, things like that. Like, and so you've definitely been hearing struggles from service providers, and on the other end, just like, I mean, the Facebook's algorithm is adapting to the change as well, and to the lack of data and the different types of data that it's receiving. So, you know, I don't have any numbers to share, but even, you know, hearing Gordon, as you know, Gordon is a member of our Launch Studio community, as hearing from experience of some of our other members, I think there was a pretty lively conversation on Slack a couple of weeks ago about that, which, you know, it's worth checking out, where they were just talking about a few creators sharing about their work with different agencies, and how, you know, once that change took effect, how they could see, you know, a market change. I do think this is one of those things that people are finding ways around it. So I think things are probably going to calm down in a few months as like the algorithm adapts, and as people find, you know, because you can still do server side ways to track. So some of the workarounds that we're doing to track Kickstarter pledges, they'll still be able to do. It's just going to take a lot more work until they figure out an easy way to make it like something that you can integrate into all these different campaigns. But it is a weird time right now where this is having probably the most impact that it's going to have because it's new.
Yeah. But weirdly, I mean, again, we haven't seen I haven't seen the impact in the data. Like we haven't, you know, it happened in May, I think mid-May. And we've had strong months since then. So again, I think we're weirdly in this good position where, you know, Kickstarter as a platform wasn't really reliant on Pixel. So we haven't really been seeing too much impact so far.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, it's hard to know, you know, it's one of those things where like some projects might feel they're impacted by it, but it might just be that they're not converting on ads, and that becomes a story. And even the excuse of a service provider you know, because it's just hard to know sometimes why something's not working, and this is definitely a factor that could be impacting it, you know. So exactly. Cool. So let's moving on to the next one. We have still, okay, great. We still have about 10 minutes, so we definitely have time for a good number more questions. Has there been any focus on personal hygiene products due to the pandemic and people's focus on being healthy? This is from Billy.
Yeah, you know, to be honest, I can't think of like well, of course we had loads of masks, you know, and more like like sterilization kind of products. So things that are like kind of specifically kind of thinking about COVID. And without getting into it, the only thing I'll say about that is that you can't make a health claim on Kickstarter. So if you are launching a type of product like that, like sterilizing or something, just be really careful that you don't make a claim that it like, you know, eliminates viruses or eliminates bacteria, and give yourself a lot of time when you submit for a trust and safety review, because you might find that you get knocked back and they say, oh, you need to edit this because you're making a health claim. But anyway, but it sounds like you're working on something maybe slightly different in terms of personal hygiene, like, I don't know, toothbrushes or, you know, I don't know, showers or heads or something like this. Like, I don't think I've seen anecdotally like any particular trend around that. And I can't think of any that were like in our top product. We have Nebbia Shower is doing really well on their third or fourth project with us right now. But, you know, it's always been a relatively thriving category. So yeah, you'll certainly find a lot of that kind of stuff on Kickstarter.
Okay, great. So let's move on to Ivan's question. What's your gut feeling towards a new category of electric personal transportation vehicle? One that is super light and compact and looks like a lunar rover. Opportunities, challenges?
Yeah. So how can I answer that? I mean, I think whenever you're doing something, you know, putting something really new out in the world, whether that's on Kickstarter or anywhere else, obviously it's, you know, as you probably know better than anyone, if you're making a product like this, it's really about like explaining to people kind of like how it's similar to something they might already be familiar with, but also how it's different. So yeah, getting that story right is again even more important when you're dealing with something like this. A good example actually I can use here. I mean, it's much different, but there was a team called Baselit who Julia will remember, and it was a device that that it kind of looked like a watch and it sat on your wrist, and it was a subwoofer for, it was essentially like a thing that it was a haptic device that essentially, oh, there you go. That essentially vibrated with the sub bass that you were listening to with your music. Now, this is like something that people didn't really understand. It's like, wait, what is this? Like this thing that's buzzing on my wrist according to the music. And I think that team did a really good job of like, their tagline was a subwoofer for your wrist or something. Like they likened it to a subwoofer because everyone kind of understands that feeling of like standing in front of a subwoofer and feeling the vibration. Even though it was like, they didn't say a haptic wrist device for music. They were like a subwoofer for your wrist. Like just trying to find those ways of kind of giving people shortcuts and like explaining something that's kind of weird, kind of complicated is really important. So I'll say that. And then maybe just the second thing is that if it's a higher price product, which you know, oftentimes these kinds of products are, then make sure that you're going to have to like essentially tell the story of that product and hook people in more deeply and give them a lot of trust, a lot of confidence in that you can deliver what it is that you're promising. Because if you're asking people to, you know, put down $1,000 or $1,500, like you're going to have to build that level of trust. And the way you can do that is by showing your prototypes really clearly on the page, like showing demos that people have done. Just like spending a lot of time, you know, talking about your team, like showing yourself in those videos. I think, yeah, that's going to be super important. Those are two things I'll say. And then, yeah, but certainly I think the transport category, you know, cycling has been really big on Kickstarter for a long time, and we've seen that go big. We've seen a few scooters, a few e-bikes. So I think it's definitely something with some room for growth. Awesome.
All right, cool. Moving on to the next one. I just want to make sure everybody saw, I did drop in the chat the link where you can, it's a form that allows you to share some information about your project, and it gets it on the radar of Heather and her team. It's enough information for them to be able to give a general assessment. And so that's, again, just for people here. So make sure if you want to use that, you better copy it and paste it before you hop off, because you won't see it again later. All right, Alex. All right, we have a question from Alex. Has Kickstarter considered tracking subcategories within the larger category, since the design tech umbrella has so many types of campaigns, ideas, products within it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say it's something that we would like. I mean, so we have, you know, within design and tech, we do have like subcategories like robotics, for example, or I think space exploration. There's wearables, and creators can self-select to like add those kind of like tags essentially to their products. I would say they're not consistently used, and they're quite limited in terms of what those categories are. So, why we don't do more, we see so many different types of products that are launching. I think that it's just a matter of like the volume of that and like how to get clean data on it. So yeah, maybe that's my excuse for now, but certainly like, yes, I personally would love that kind of thing. So yeah.
Cool. Let's take the next one from Adam. What are your thoughts on launching products that are already in the market? Does the product have to be not been seen before from your brand, or would it need to be a 2.0 version that hasn't been seen?
First of all, hi, Adam. Adam is a creator who's launched a product called Ocular Eclipse on Kickstarter. So it has to be a 2.0. So you can launch something that is a 2.0 version. It can't be the same. So if you're already selling the exact same thing, you would not be allowed to launch it on Kickstarter, but you could launch a 2.0 version. So it could be something with like a notable new feature, maybe it's a very distinctively new form factor, distinctively new material or design or something like that. So yeah, 2.0s are allowed. Yeah, just keep in mind that it has to be something that you could tell a story around and kind of get people excited about. Like, if it's some, really small difference, like it's going to be hard to kind of get your community excited about that. But yeah, it has to be different. It can't just be something that's already existing.
And Heather, just a second follow up on that. For 2.0 type projects, their ability to get featured also hamper, like it can hamper their ability to get featured, right? If they're not, if the difference isn't interesting or compelling enough, they might even be able to launch, but they won't get any love from Kickstarter most likely.
Exactly, because if we go back to those, those filters that I was talking about from our editorial team, they're looking for like a genuine reason for why you want to launch on Kickstarter and genuine connection with the community. And so, if you're doing a 2.0 version with small changes, that might not be compelling as a kind of reason for coming to Kickstarter. And also that, they do want to see things that are, it's not the only factor, but we do take it in consideration, like, whether this is best in class, whether it's new and notable, whether it's doing something new in the world. Great. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. And so we have time for one, possibly two. I'm just going to tell everybody, this is your last chance to upvote questions if you want to have a chance that one of these questions get answered. I'm going to take the, now that they only all have one vote. Oh wait, I think that anyone, I was going to take the one that was asked first, since they all have only one vote now. And so the one that was asked first was by Anaruda. Hi, we are running a project in the tech category now, and we got really amazing response, especially from our country. We launched the first tech project from our country. We have 370 backers, 215 first-time backers. I just wonder why Kickstarter doesn't support Facebook Pixel, which I think you've already answered. So I think we can, and how they decide the projects we love tag. Thank you. I think you kind of answered those two already.
I would say, but
you want to add?
I would say drop your link in the chat. You didn't tell me what your live project was, so definitely make sure to drop it in the chat, because I'll take a look at it. And also just congrats. I mean, as somebody who works on the international side of our business, I love to hear that you're the first from your country launching a Kickstarter project. So yeah, drop it in the chat and we'll make sure to take a look. Thanks. So I see it there. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, great. Now let's see. Okay, still no upvote. So let's see the next one up that got asked was Gordon asked, do you have a feel for how much support for VR content there is on Kickstarter?
Ooh, that is a good question. And the honest answer is I do not, because the VR content tends to launch either in the film category or in the games category. And those are categories that I'm a little bit less familiar with. I'm not sure that I can give a useful answer behind. I mean, we certainly see a lot of that stuff. I mean, of course, people who own VR goggles or devices are not, it's not going to be everybody. We do see a lot of VR hardware, and some of those projects do like VR sort of peripheral hardware, and so, like some of those tend to do pretty well, like controllers or walking pads. But on the content side, I'm not exactly sure. But yeah. Sorry that I can't give a more detailed answer.
Great, cool. So look, we're at 1:14. I think we're gonna start wrapping up. I want to make sure we get done by 1:15. So I have 1 minute now for us to close up here today. So, the first thing, of course, that I want to do is to thank Heather for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to have you here with us. Yeah, so thanks so much for sharing your time, sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure. And then I wanted to quickly, ask everybody who joined, send me feedback. You can send it to me at julio@launchstudio.com. I'm always looking to see how we can make these events better, what you liked about it, what you didn't. Is there somebody who you want us to invite to one of these events? Is there a topic that you want us to cover? Just let me know. And check out our past events. Just go to go.launchstudio.com/YouTube. You can see all the events that we've did in the past. Again, I think I already did a thank you to Heather, and just now, thank you to all of you who attended the event today and participated and asked questions and shared your thoughts. We really do appreciate your participation and your contribution. And with that, I will wrap it up and just say, have a great rest of your Tuesday.